I was asking Mr. Vaughn about the purpose of studying history. We just watched the Nationtime Gary DVD. The film written and produced by William Greaves. It's a film of the 1972 National Black Political Convention in Gary, Indiana, one of the largest black political conventions in the U.S. to date. This convention was part of a long stream of conventions that took place in the United States beginning in 1830. Mr. Vaughn was there. He was present. He was with the Michigan delegation. He remained in the convention after the Michigan delegation walked out, led by soon-to-be Mayor Coleman Young. Some questions I have for Mr. Vaughn are as follows. The first one being the purpose of studying history, which is what Neely Fuller once told me. He said the purpose of studying history is to find out what things worked, find out what things didn't work, and use that information to improve our situation today. I'm going to be quiet and let Mr. Ed Vaughn speak now. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's very important to know who you are and to study history, our history. But it's also good to study their history. Because when I was in college, I graduated from Fisk University with a degree in history and government, and I went to law school at the University of Illinois School of Law at Champaign-Urbana. But one of the things that I always knew, and Dr. John Hope Franklin, who was also a Fisk University graduate, reminded us that, and Malcolm X said, of all of our studies, history is best qualified to reward all research. That's a direct quote from Malcolm X. So if you want to know what your situation is today, and you want to know who's messing with you today and why they're messing with you today, then your job is to find out who you are. Because we didn't just get here a year before the Mayflower. We were here long before anybody else. And we are not people who came late in civilization. We had, in fact, the world's first great civilization. And we raised the pyramids above the Nile, and we gave to the world the sciences of chemistry, physics, mathematics, astronomy, and astrology. And we laid the basis for Eastern and Western civilization, black people. I'm not talking about the latecomers to ancient Egypt. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about the truth. The world's first multi-genius was Imhotep, who built the step pyramid. And the great pyramids that exist now were built by the great black Pharaoh Khufu. So we have a beautiful history, and we must keep that history alive and teach it to our children. And I've taught it for many, many years here in Detroit. I taught in the public schools of Detroit. I spoke at many, many schools in Detroit. And let me tell you one story about that part of my struggle. I opened Vaughn's Bookstore in 1959, the year I got out of the military. I served 2 years in the Army, and I was stationed in Germany. And I learned a lot about Adolf Hitler, the concentration camps, because I was near Dachau. So I opened Vaughn's Bookstore when I got out of the military in 1959. And we became it was the second black bookstore in America. And we did a lot of work in the bookstore. And I used to speak all over Detroit and all of the public schools and colleges. I didn't miss any. Not only did I speak, I taught in public schools. I taught at Lawrence Institute of Technology. I taught at Wayne State University, University of Detroit. I've done all of that. So one time I made a speech. I believe it was an elementary school on Puritan, just west of Livernois, I believe it was. And I gave my stump speech to the children, and they were like in the second or third, fourth grade, somewhere in that range. They were elementary school kids. And many, many years later, my last bookstore was on Livernois, where my son's shop is now, called Eric's I've Been Frame Shop. And a young man walked up in front of my store one day. I was outside sweeping the sidewalk off, and he said, "Mr. Vaughn?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I want to thank you for saving my life." I said, "How did I save your life, son?" He was well dressed, his wife, and he had 2 children. And I said, "How did I save your life?" He said, "Well, Mr. Vaughn, you came to my school when I was in elementary school, and I listened to you." And he said, when I got up into junior high and high school, he said, I began to sell drugs. And he said, I made a lot of money selling drugs. He said, but I was miserable with myself. And he said, one night, I took out my 9mm gun, pistol, and I put that to my head. And he said that I was about to pull the trigger when I saw you telling me that we were a great people and that we need to rebuild our civilization. He said, I put the gun down. Something just told me, don't pull that trigger. I see Mr. Vaughn, and I see him making that speech. He said he put the gun down, changed his life, and there he was today. Had a good job, finished school, and was with his wife and 2 children. We hugged, I cried. I mean, I cried. And I've had so many stories, but that was the only one I had like that. That was a really deep one. Mm-hmm. So, and since I've been back here, because I live in Alabama, I've had so many people tell me how Vaughn's bookstore inspired them and inspired their life. I mean, the #1 expert on the life of Malcolm X is a young man out of Detroit named Paulie. Paulie was the consultant on the film by the filmmaker. What's his name? The filmmaker out of Morehouse. He graduated from Morehouse.
Spike Lee?
Spike Lee, yeah. He was the consultant on that film, and he knew so much about Malcolm X. And but he came to my store when he was in the 10th grade and asked me for books on Bruce Lee. And I said, well, I don't have any Bruce Lee books. I got some later, but I didn't have any at that time. I said, but you know what? I said, have you ever heard of Malcolm X? He said, no, sir. I gave him the book, the autobiography. I gave it to him free of charge. The book, the autobiography. I used to give a lot of books away free. Called The Autobiography of Malcolm X. That was by Alex Haley, and Malcolm was telling it to Alex Haley. And I said, son, you go home and read this. He was at my feet every day. Every day he came to my store. Sir, what do you know about Mr. Malcolm? What did he do? He read the book overnight. 10th grade now. And he was at my feet for at least 3 months. Unstoppable. And now he's the world's expert on Malcolm X. And then when Malcolm was assassinated, here in Detroit, and this is why I love Detroit so much, a great black community here. When Malcolm was assassinated, we had a meeting, the group that I was a part of on the Central Committee called the Pan-African Congress USA. And we raised money for Betty Shabazz and her family. And we had Dan Aldrich to deliver that money to her in New York. And Dan delivered the money, told it was from me and the Pan-African Congress. And she called me to thank me. And we became lifelong friends after that. No matter where she went, she would call me. No matter what she went through, she would call me. And she was a Detroiter, you know, but she did not falter to make sure I kept up with her. And even guys who was hitting on her, she would call me and tell me what guy was hitting on her, you know. But she and I were such close friends. And then she told me this story because she taught at a college in New York, and it was, I'm gonna think of the name of it, the name slips me right now, but she was teaching at the college. And so then, you know, she was a registered nurse, but I think she was teaching mainly black studies at the college. And she said one day she looked down and she had runs in her hose, her stockings. And so she said, well, let me go out to the store. And the store was in the hood. She said, let me go out to the store and get me a new pair of hose. So she went out to the store to get us some new hose. But before she got in the store, all these yo boys was outside, and you know, they were drunks and drug addicts and homeless and everything else. And so they started whistling at her. Hey, baby, you look good. Oh, you look all fine. Baby, you sure got some fine legs and all that stuff, you know. And then she didn't pay. She said she didn't pay them any. And she told me this story. She said she didn't pay them any attention. She just walked on into the store, and she bought her stockings, and then she bought some other items to take back. It was Medgar Evers College where she taught. She bought some other items to take back. And she said when she walked out of the store, front door. They were on, she said all these guys that were whistling at her and making cat calls at her, they were on their knees begging her, oh, we found out you Malcolm X as well. Ma'am, we love you. Please forgive us for doing what we did. Please forgive us. They were crying and just pleading. They were on their knees, almost rolling over for her. And Betty said, I forgive you. And she walked by and went on back to school. But that shows the impact, even among the people who are considered at the bottom of the barrel. They loved Malcolm. And I love Malcolm. I own the rights to all of his records. He made 3 records. All 3 of them were made in Detroit. The first one was what is the first one? I'm gonna name the other 2. The second one was Balance of Bullets. He brought that to us in the Freedom Now Party because we were trying to get black folks to join this all-black political party called the Freedom Now Party. And so Malcolm came here, and at the church on 14th Street, he spoke, and out of that speech came Balance of Bullets. You know, the black Muslim did not vote. And so here was Malcolm, and now he had pulled away from the Nation of Islam. He agreed with us, you ought to vote. But he framed it around also, if you can't vote, you have to maybe have a revolution. And that was before the 1967 revolution. So that was his second album. And the third album was The Last Message, that he recorded that at Ford Auditorium. I was there. And all of his recordings were done by Milton Henry, attorney Milton Henry. His African name was Gaidi. And so so all 3 of the recordings, Milton Henry, attorney Milton Henry, and they own the rights. He transferred the rights to myself and to Kwame Atta, who was a very close friend of mine, who died he died here in this country, but he lived in Africa for several years. And then when he passed, the rights went to me, and now I'm the sole owner of the rights. Not his family, but I am the sole owner of the rights. And they've never tried, as long as Betty lived, she was good with it, because I told her, any royalties come from the recordings, you get half of them. And unfortunately, we never got many royalties. We got a little money, and I sent her share of that. But the recordings are legendary. And so all 3 recordings are still available in some way. All platinum records out of Inglewood Cliffs, New Jersey. I gave them the right to press it, to press them, and they did a DVD version, and I think they did a VHS version when they first did it, and then but the people who I contracted with, they all did now, so I don't even know if they still exist, all platinum records. But Malcolm was a tremendous figure in our history, and I love him and respect. I love him, still love him and respect him, and I love Betty. And she had a tragic death. Her grandson burned up the bed she was in. I think he was trying to send a message to her. I don't think he intended to kill her, but it did kill her, and she went on away from us. But so many, we've lost so many in the struggle, and unfortunately, young people don't really recognize because nobody tells it. You won't know nothing unless somebody tell you something, especially when you're young. Because, my head was hard when I was young, so I didn't know nothing. But fortunately, I had my mother, who was a great storyteller. Her father, who was a mulatto, he had been a slave, and his mother was raped every day by the slave owner. And he didn't make my grandfather work in the fields because that was his son. And so my grandfather hated him because of what he was doing to his mother. And so my grandfather plotted to kill him one day. And rather than kill him, he couldn't find him. But the goat, the prize goat that won all of the blue ribbons that my grandfather had to attend to, he killed the goat, and he ran away. And then he came back to Barber County, which is where the city of Eufaula is, Barber County. That's the Barber County is in the east end of the Alabama Black Belt. That's where a lot of slaves were. So they married and came to Henry County, which is where I was born, Abbeville, Alabama. If you know about the story Oprah made about Risa Taylor, the black woman who was raped, she is buried right over across the street from where I was born in Abbeville, Alabama, in a section called Rock Hill. But so when I had the bookstore here, I spoke about black history everywhere, and I've had so many people tell me how the bookstore inspired them, how it changed their life, how it just did so much for them. And kids used to come in, I let them read it, and wouldn't charge them anything. They could sit there and read. And one lady, she always hits me up on Facebook. She says she read every book in my store, sitting there reading them, because I never bothered them about that. So that was a good part of that. Mm-hmm. So then I was executive assistant to Mayor Coleman Young for 10 years. Of course, he fired me because he would not accept the plan that I had. It was during the crack epidemic, and I had a plan that I knew we could win. And we could win with that plan to mobilize our youth. And the mayor never instituted that plan. And when I decided to run for city council, then I could talk about my plan. He fired me, and they blocked me at city council. So I couldn't run. But anyway, I mean, I ran, but I lost, is what I meant to say. But then I got a job, because I was blocked from jobs all over Detroit. I couldn't get a job. Nobody would hire me. Nobody would even talk to me. People who used to be my colleagues wouldn't even speak to me in the mayor's office. They wouldn't even speak to me. So I was ostracized and kicked out pretty much. But I kept my philosophical base, because I knew that we were the civilizers of the world. And I knew that my mission was to go out and preach and teach everywhere I went, that I was supposed to do that. And then I got a job teaching at a school called William Robinson Elementary School over on the east side around Houston, Whittier, and Gratiot in Detroit. And I started working there. And one of the things that I decided, it was a rough school in a very rough neighborhood. It was during the crack epidemic, so you know things were bad. So I started teaching there, and kids were still, unruly and this. And I said, I got to figure out a way that I can convince them to be a part of doing good rather than doing bad. And so I decided to make them stand when I walked into the classroom. Now, children all over the world will stand when the professor walks into the classroom, except in America. So I decided to have them stand, and stand in attention, because I was in the military, so I knew something about drilling and about that. And so they would stand in attention. And so I did that for about 2 weeks. Then I said, well, I got to do something else. They love standing now. They love the idea. Feet at a 45-degree angle, hands to the side, looking straight ahead. And I said, I got to get them something to say, because, and people always say, but they don't know nothing, they don't read nothing. And so I gave them a speech that I wrote in 5 minutes. And the speech is called the Code of Mehat. Mehat is ancient Egyptian, which means to do good. If you didn't practice Mehat in your life, they had what they call the negative confessions in ancient Egypt, and you had to practice Mehat. And so I call my thing that I wrote for the children the Code of Mehat, and it goes like this. Stand in attention, feet at a 45-degree angle, looking straight ahead. I pledge today to open my mind. I will seek and learn new knowledge. I will not harm, fight, or disrespect my fellow brother or sister. My body, mind, and the words I speak are clean. I will respect my parents, my teachers, and myself. I will use my knowledge to stay in school and build a new and better world. I am great. My education will make me even greater. Watoto wa Africa, Mehat, Mehat. Now that last line is Watoto wa Africa, is Kiswahili for we are the children of Africa. And of course, Mehat, as I had said a little earlier, Mehat is ancient Egyptian about how you had to live your life. You had to be a good person. You had to adhere to the negative confessions, where you would say to Amun Ra, which was God, Amun Ra, you would say to Amun Ra, I have not sinned, I have not harmed my neighbor, I have not harmed my neighbor's wife. Beautiful, the negative confession. Kids loved it, they ate it up. Then they had never heard of any historically black college. They had never even heard of Tuskegee, Tennessee State University, or Fisk University, my alma mater. So I had my children write every black college in America, and they didn't know how to write a letter. And so I had to show them where the stamp goes. I had to show them where the address goes. And they did it. And they wrote every black college in America. Then I had them do a thing for the African countries. I had them to write every African country's embassy in Washington, D.C. And the black colleges and the African embassies were sending them big packages back, and they were just totally elated. And they ran to school. Mr. Vaughn, look what I got. Look what I got from Fisk University. Look what I got from Morehouse College, Spelman College. I said, okay, I told you. And then we had a black college fair, and that went really, really well. And it was recorded in the Detroit News and Free Press. You can go back and find it. Black College Fair at William Robinson Elementary School. And then we had a program there called the Organization of African Unity Meets the United Nations. Because some of my kids I had dressed in European attire, and then the others were in African clothing, because we were going to do a mock session of the United Nations. And then they all had to march in, and we played the Ghanaian national anthem for them to march in. And they marched in. They were so beautiful. And then they said, some of the other folks said, well, ain't no parents coming out for this. Ain't no guardians coming out. They never come out for any program. At that program, we invited the school superintendent, Dr. Deborah McGriff. She was wonderful. In fact, one of the persons in there was her boyfriend. That's Owusu Sadoki in that film, Howard Fuller. Anyway, the place was packed. You couldn't get in there. They were standing room only. They were standing all over the school. And so, but it was packed. And we did so many great things. I had them doing opera. I had them doing Porgy and Bess. They had never heard of Porgy and Bess. And the kids used to just laugh. They get a kick out. Bess, you is my woman now. You is. And I want to tell you how much I love you. And then Bess said, Porgy, I is your woman now. And the kids just ate it up. And I was so elated. And we did so many other things there. And I organized the drill team. I had 800 children that I taught. And I must have had between 200 and 300 in the drill team. And I made all of the bad boys squad leaders and all the bad girls squad leaders. And everybody else gonna fall in line. And they knew they had to fall in line to be the squad leaders. So all the others fell in line, and they did their thing. And I would see how disciplined they are by taking them to the playground when all the other kids be out jumping up and down and hollering this. I would make them stand in attention for about 20 to 30 minutes. And they wouldn't move. They stand straight, and the kids just looking at them. Oh my God, that is so great. And then we set up corporations in the school. They started naming their corporations after African countries because they had written the country. They started naming the corporations after black colleges. They had the Morehouse Corporation. They had the Fisk Corporation. I said, this is great. Spelman Corporation. Then I took them to the Thursday luncheon group, which I was a member of. At one point I was the president. And we met at the Cotillion Club, the Thursday luncheon group. This was black businessmen would meet. And I took all my kids to the Thursday. I had busloads of kids took them. And they got up and mentioned that they were corporate executives, and the name of that corporation was such and so, Fisk, Morehouse, Spelman. It was so beautiful. Now let me tell you, and I taught there until I was recruited by Spencer Haywood, the basketball player. He recruited me to help him, and this is why I said if Coleman had taken my plan, we would have not had so many deaths in Detroit. But he didn't. But anyway, Spencer Haywood recruited me from the school. Well, I had done my work. We had even changed the name of the school. We ain't going to no school named no William Robinson. Who was he? Some white man nobody ever heard of. And so we named our school Ma'at, Imhotep. Imhotep was the world's first multi-genius who built the first pyramid, the Great Step Pyramid. And he discovered that the heart was the center of the human body. And what most people don't know is when medical doctors in America and in the world take the Hippocratic Oath. Now, Hippocrates is not the father of medicine, but they swear by, they say, the first thing they say in the Hippocratic Oath when they graduate from medical school is, I swear by Apollo the physician and Imhotep, and not, they don't use Imhotep, Aesculapius. Is I swear by Apollo the physician and Aesculapius to be a good doctor and go on and go on and go. But what 99% of the doctors don't know is Aesculapius was the name that the Greeks gave Imhotep, the African, who was the world's first medical doctor. And so, when I tell them that, the white folks are truly amazed. And then when I tell them that the human family is monogenetic, and it has been proven, and that everybody on earth, black, white, brown, green, or yellow, came from Africa. And we did. But the DNA, which is really recent, it hasn't been around that long, maybe 20 years when the DNA first came out, 20 or 30 years ago. It wasn't long ago that we knew the genetic code, where we can tell who killed somebody, who raped somebody by the DNA in your semen or whatever. So DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, very important thing. And then it just really made the idea of where folks came from and who they are even more prevalent. But now the idea that life began in Africa and that they were black was done by Dr. Leakey, who was a white anthropologist out of Europe. His home was in, I think, the United Kingdom, one of the European countries. And Dr. Leakey came back to Kenya in East Africa sometime, and they asked him, well, Dr. Leakey, why are you coming back here to Africa? He said, I'm just coming back home, because this is where I began. The human family began in Africa. Everybody on earth, black, white, brown, green, and yellow, no matter what you call yourself, can trace your ancestry back to one black woman. They did this with the DNA. One black woman who lived in Africa 230,000 years ago. Now, she's everybody's grandma. Why do we look different? Why are some of us dark, some of us are brown, some of us are black, some of us are white? Why are we all different colors? And Dr. W. Francis Worth Loomis, a biochemist at Brandeis University, developed something called the vitamin D theory. And vitamin D is what keeps your bone structure together. If you don't have vitamin D, you'll die. You see, you got to get some vitamin D. And then before, in old times, it only came from the sun, because they had not developed artificial means of making vitamin D. So you only got it from the sun. So if you were born on the equator in Africa, which is where the first humans were, you got to be dark. You got to be black. I ain't talking about dark, you got to be black. Because the black skin filters out the ultraviolet rays of the sun. You see, if your skin ain't black, and I've been on the equator, I was on the equator in Uganda, and I'm telling you, it is hot. And it ain't the kind of heat you get here, it's a different kind of heat. It'll tear your butt up, and you would wish you were black as the ace of spades in that kind of sun. And then Dr. Loomis says that when the human family got up around the 40th parallel, which is around Madrid and Naples, Madrid, Spain, Naples, Italy, the darker skinned Africans tended to lighten up some. And you know that Southern Europeans are darker than Northern Europeans. And then because now you're not getting as much sunlight, so your skin is brown, it turns brown. Then when you go further up, where you get no sunlight, you better have some white skin so the sun can penetrate your body and give you the much needed vitamin D in order to live. There was no other way to do it. And then people ask, why do Eskimos who live in cold climates do not have a problem with vitamin D? Because they don't get no sun. They eat a lot of fish and fish liver. And that's where they get their vitamin D from. That's why they remain dark. So when I tell white folks that, they mouth open, and they don't teach that in any schools anywhere. But that's truth.
Yes, sir.
And so that's something that I'm very proud that I was able to do, and we have turned so many people around in terms of how they view the human family. The human family is monogenetic. Keep that, and it came from Africa. So everybody was African at one time. Okay.
Okay, you can start now.
Okay, when I was teaching school at William Robertson Elementary School in Detroit, we later changed the name to Ma'at Imhotep Technical Academy. I taught black history and culture, and one of my friends, Naja Ma'at, my dear friend, she wears African attire, and she is a cloth expert, a fabric expert, and she taught culture in the school, black culture. And so we had a great program going. Well, after I finished teaching there, Spencer Haywood recruited me, the great basketball player Spencer Haywood. He recruited me to do an anti-drug program in the Brewster Projects. And our program ran all of the drug dealers out of Brewster Project. So we did an excellent job. But at a later date, after I had left William Robertson, one night I wanted some barbecue. My Technical Academy. One night I wanted some barbecue, and the only place that I could get, the place I wanted to go was Milt's Barbecue on Harper on the east side, and I couldn't find anywhere to park. It was very dark that night, and I could find nowhere to park. So I parked about 6 blocks from Milt's Barbecue. Now, Milt was murdered a few years ago here in Detroit in his business. But this was before he was murdered, but it was a rough neighborhood. But I wanted to barbecue so bad that night that I didn't mind walking 6 blocks in the dark to Milt's to get some barbecue. Well, at night, 3 boys, 3 young men, or 3 men, I thought they were full-grown men, were coming toward me. And they were taller than me, because I'm short anyway, but they were much taller than me. And I said, Lord, I had about $80 on me. I said, Lord, I said, this is gonna be it here. I'm not gonna be it. You better put your seatbelt on. I said, Lord, I'm gonna get wiped out tonight and look like these boys are going to kill me, beat me up. And I said, just don't let them kill me. I'll give them this money I got, and I'll be finished with it. So anyway, when they got up where they could see me clear and I could see them, they hollered, Mr. Vaughn. I said, oh, Lord, thank you, Jesus, thank you. And they said, Mr. Vaughn, what you doing in this neighborhood? I said, well, I'm trying to get some barbecue because I love that Milt's Barbecue. And they said, Mr. Vaughn, we're not going to let you walk up there by yourself because you taught us at Ma'at Imhotep Technical Academy. And said, we never forgot the things that you taught us to do and what you said about our history. And they said, we walking up there with you. They walked 6 blocks with me to the barbecue place, boys that I had taught. And when we got to the barbecue place, I asked them, do you want me to buy you something to barbecue dinner? They said, no, sir. We don't want nothing. We just want to make sure you're safe. They stayed there the entire time I was there, and they walked me all the way back to my car, and they said, Mr. Vaughn, we're doing this because we love you so much for what you did for us. And then I drove away, and they were still standing there until I drove away. That is a hell of a story, and that tells me that what I was doing was not in vain. And that's what we should do everywhere, in every school, everywhere that we can. We got to work together, we got to fight together, and we can do it, and we got to unite together. And we can't unite being separated. We got to come together for a purpose, a real purpose. That's for freedom, justice, and equality. Thank you so much.